Bruh, this specific configuration, 32 volts, 3.3 amps. EOP. Hold on. Oh my god. That puts me at 106. Bro, if I'm at 106 watts to create the 118 volts, that's now 338 watts. That's an even new record. 338 watts to create my 118 volts, to create my 1 liter per minute. 106 watts to create the 1/3 of a liter per minute would translate to 338 watts per liter. Wow. Here it is again, kind of tuning into frequency. 3.4 amps at 32 volts. With my 118 volts at the cell, give or take, only 700 milliamps at the cell, so that milliamps is down even further. We have, I believe that's comparable production. We'll have to do a test here. Just below that 100 mark, so we may be just under that gas production level. Investigating this waveform, we've got just a little bit more positive potential than negative potential. Yeah, whenever we could balance this and maybe shave a few more amps off. Kind of a strange configuration here. The secondaries coil, I have one of the secondaries connected as a secondary. So the secondary is no longer a bi-fi. The secondary is a single file wire. The inductor A is the other half of that secondary coil. So we have the secondary coil, diode, other secondary coil as inductor A, no inductor B. Diode in the standard position, current respective. This just keeps getting crazier and crazier. I just try different configs and get better production, better amperage. It just keeps getting better, folks.
This is Stan's Revenge.
I mean, here we get 100 volts at the cell, and, you know, we're at 25... maybe 30 to 40 watts input power total. I need to do some math, but that's impressive alone. Like, we get production definitely at 110 volts is what we're at right now. Well under 1 amp. Let's add some inductance on the negative. Alright, that is just about perfectly balanced now. We've got our 118 volts at the cell. That can't be right, hang on. Amp meter was bugging out. 800 milliamps at the cell. 30.5 at 4.1. Let's see what that is. About 125 watts, a little bit higher than what our previous one here on this experiment. Looks like appropriate production. I am able to get 121 volts at the cell here, under an amp. At 4.5 amps, which is what I was here, producing 118 volts, but now instead I'm producing 121, so a little bit higher voltage. I do know once I get over the 1 kilohertz mark, this thing definitely is transmitting some noise into speakers and other devices and things like that, so I might have to look at shielding this thing here at some point. Real quick, I want to look at these cells here. It does appear, and it may not be that noticeable, that this cell is producing a lot more gunk than this cell. And I might actually be hearing some internal shorting on this thing when I have it at certain frequencies and certain voltages, so I'm wondering if that's affecting my cells. I might pull these things apart, at least this one here, to investigate it. Where's my finger? That thing, to investigate it, to see if we've got something happening here. Cool. What were we at previously? We're at 3.5 amps now. Hold on. So how are we at 4.4 amps here? We have 121 volts at the cell and a nice balanced waveform. However, if I were to add just a little bit more inductance on this here secondary, my amperage consumption goes down by like an amp, but it's not truly balanced anymore. I've got more positive than I do negative polarity. And there's about 118 volts, or I have been. But we're at 3.5 amps. Hold the phone. That's about 115 watts here, closer to our 106 we had previously, which probably still puts us under 400 watts per liter. So that's interesting. Hang on, I want to see what else I can do here. Go back to 4.4 amps here, input. That brings us up to 121 volts, and this is now balanced somehow. What gives? Had some wiring wrong, hang on. So that gives us our 118 volts, only at 30 volts input at 4.5 amps. I really need a calculator out here. That's 132 watts here, so not our best, but interesting nonetheless. It does allow us to crank up to 123 volts pretty effortlessly, which gives us definitely gives us good gas production. Adding even more inductance on that Inductor B gets us up to 126 volts in the cell, a imbalanced waveform of course, and 6.5 amps. Spicy, 130 volts. And consuming 8 amps though. Pretty balanced waveform, impressive. This mode does let me achieve 118 volts, kind of our benchmark here, at 26 volts at 6.3 amps. Let's see what that is. It's 168 watts, which is not impressive whatsoever.
This is Stan's Revenge.